British Palestinian Lib Dem MP Layla Moran also has lost a family member in the conflict. She and Jewish Labour MP Alex Sobel, who has family in Israel, visited the region early this year to meet people affected by the conflict.
I'm outside a house. In fact, this is the safe room of a family that were killed by Hamas.
As fears grow of tensions escalating into a wider war, the pair remain united in their calls for peace.
And Layla Moran and Alex Sobel join us now. It's been a year of death and devastation and huge frustration, political standoff. But we should start on this day of anniversary by remembering the people who lost their lives, 1,200 people who lost their lives with the Hamas attack into Israel, but also the 97 hostages who are still a year on, separated from their families. We don't know where they are. I mean, it's staggering to think of a country like Israel dealing with 97 hostages for 12 months.
Absolutely. I mean, we've got witness testimony from people who were released when we had the temporary ceasefire and the deal, who talked about the conditions they were kept in, and we know that people are emaciated, that there are, awful conditions, people aren't receiving health treatment. So those 97 people are probably in a terrible state, and that's why we need a deal to be done and the hostages to be returned to their families.
I was thinking, Layla, I mean, imagine if Parliament was meeting today in Britain, where you'd had hostages in that scale for a year. I mean, there would be uproar, wouldn't there?
And understandably so, and there has been uproar in Israel. We've seen huge protests as people have said, bring them home, and it is devastating. We are good at finding silver linings and hope in stuff, aren't we, Alex? And one of the things that over this last year I reflect is, we've been doing more work together, but also we've been meeting people who have lost loved ones. And I'm thinking of them today, our friends Magen and Mao Zinon, for example, whose house we visited. Their parents, there was a missile that was launched into their house, and we saw their burnt-out car in the house. And we've been doing a lot of work with them, because out of that, what they asked was, don't seek revenge, seek peace. And these are people who are today, that extraordinary grief. Through that, you could understand how anger could so easily flow from that. And instead, we are trying to raise the voices of those, and they are small, but they are growing in Israel and Palestine and beyond, who say, from this, when it ends, and it will end, I can't believe we're a year on and it's still not ended, and it just looks like it's getting worse, but it will end. And from the embers of it, we have a choice about what comes next. And I think we have to make people understand. We've always said, it's not about one side or the other. If there were to be two sides, it's those who want peace and those who don't. And we stand on the side of people who want a different future, different leaders, different outcomes. And then there are all those who are perpetrating this violence, frankly, because it suits them.
And I mean, that's absolutely a message we can get behind. This is not about taking sides other than if you're on the side of wanting peace or not. I mean, fundamentally, that has to be what this is about. But Alex, as a British Jew with a strong connection to Israel because your parents lived there, how do you feel today, a year on? How do you feel in terms of your safety? How do British Jews feel about this anniversary? Because actually, this isn't just about what happened a year ago in Israel. This is what has happened in the year since to Jews here.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we've got lots of families, British Jewish families, who have relatives that were either killed on the 7th of October or were taken hostage. So they've been going through incredible things. But we have had, I'm afraid to say, an incredibly high rise, historically high rise in the number of anti-Semitic incidents. The Community Security Trust, which is the organisation that looks after the Jewish community in the UK, provides security for Jewish buildings like synagogues and community centres, said that in the first half of this year, there were nearly 2,000 anti-Semitic hate incidents. Same time in 2023, it was less than half of that. So, we've had basically a doubling.
And is that something you've experienced?
Not to my face and not online. It's actually, to be honest, the people that are most affected, the people that physically present as Jewish, particularly from the Orthodox community, but online, absolutely. You know, what we see is when things happen in Israel is that anti-Semitism rises, you know. But I think the same issues around Islamophobia. We've had a huge increase in Islamophobia
as well.
What happens in the Middle East affects us here domestically. That's absolutely true. You know, I think we both feel that. But the centre of this, you know, what we're experiencing is nothing to what people in Israel or in Palestine or now in Lebanon are experiencing.
And Layla, you have a personal connection. Obviously, you're of Palestinian heritage, but you've also lost a member of your family.
So back in November, he was in his 70s, got what we suspect was a ruptured gallbladder. They were in a church in northern Gaza and, of course, just couldn't get to the hospital. And so he died of something that, you know, doctors tell us would have been relatively easily treatable. Luckily, they're out. We had to move mountains to get them out, and it was a minor miracle that we managed to do it. And let's be perfectly honest, had I not been an MP trying to agitate on their behalf, we probably wouldn't have managed it. And there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of families that are still there, including some of their wider family, still sheltering in those churches. And I understand that evacuation orders for the north of Gaza were issued overnight yesterday, displacing more. The ones in the church there call themselves Noah's Ark because there's such a small Christian Palestinian population in Gaza that they see themselves as wanting to stay in those churches to maintain that population. But, you know, to the Islamophobia point, we are all feeling it. And it's not just sort of anti-Muslim hate. I felt it in people throwing hate at me just because I'm a Palestinian, assuming that I hold certain views and I don't reach out.
And how does that manifest itself?
It's always online. It's people who don't know me. It's people who don't perhaps even watch this programme and understand that there are a range of views around this. I don't think I care about what's thrown at me. No. What I want to see is, you know, that family member of mine who died, all those, you know, the 42,000 people in Gaza who've died, the thousands now in Lebanon who are dying. We warned back last year when we first had that ceasefire vote that we needed a ceasefire to stop that regional escalation. We are now seeing it manifest.
Can I ask you, because you've done great work together, really important, and Layla, you explained, you know, your collective motive for that, you know, for peace rather than conflict. But this debate has become very polarised in the last year. A lot of kind of anger and frustration on both sides. I just wonder, do both of you find that the people within the communities you're from, do they say to you, what on earth are you doing trying to work with somebody when we should be angry and fighting? You know, are you criticised by Palestinian friends for working with Alex? Alex, do you find that people in the community saying, look, don't you understand, these guys are the enemy?
I will say for myself, first of all, I'm not angry. I am angry, but I'm not angry at Alex. I'm not angry at people who have nothing to do with this. I am angry that it's been 100 years that we haven't solved this. I'm angry at our governments that they didn't get a grip decades ago and followed international law and came to that two-state solution, and we would be talking in a completely different context now. And I'm angry, of course, at Netanyahu and the people who are dropping bombs on civilians that are putting my people at risk. Of course I'm angry, but what's the point of that anger if we then don't try and do something with it? And so when I do have people who say, oh, you know, aren't you angry? I am angry, but I'm choosing to channel that in a different way, and that doesn't diminish their anger. And there are members in the Palestinian community who have lost, you know, 50, 60, 100 members of their families because, you know, a bomb has dropped on a whole building where they live. Like, I get that anger, and they are grieving, and this trauma is ongoing. Yeah. But you don't have to, you know, put that to one side and then balance it against the grieving families of who lost people a year ago today in Israel. That grief is valid, and that anger is valid.
I think the overwhelming urge in all of the Jewish community is for those remaining hostages, 97 hostages, to be freed. And so whoever we work with as the Jewish community, as a Jewish MP, if it's for the aim of releasing hostages, there is very little kickback from anybody. On a broader, plane, I think everybody understands that Layla's a mainstream British Palestinian politician, and in the Jewish community, particularly amongst people that I know, there's a very clear delineation between Hamas as a terrorist organisation, a medieval terrorist organisation who butchered...
Although amongst young people, is there that understanding at the moment in Britain? Do you think young people differentiate between Hamas and Palestine, Gaza?
I think there's an educational job to be done, absolutely. And we've got some social media channels in particular, particularly ones that seem to have very little moderation, like X, which, perpetrate these sort of false narratives. Absolutely. So, actually having our sort of debate, us sitting here in the mainstream media, is really important, so people understand that actually the majority of people in the Palestinian community are logical people that want peace, and the same thing in the Jewish community.
And in the same way, exactly, because, if you're going to tarnish the whole of the Jewish community in the UK by the views of the ministers Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, who are members of the Israeli cabinet who incite violence and use genocidal language, I mean, that's completely unacceptable. I would urge everyone who looks at this debate on this anniversary, we know, most people now know a bit more than they did a year ago. But this is arguably one of the most complex conflicts in the world. We have a lot more to do, but join us in our efforts for peace. We can have a different future. You start by actually learning all of the past first.
Thank you so much. Such an important interview this morning with you both, and thank you for your work in such a sensitive situation and at a very sensitive time. Thank you.
More important now than a year ago. I mean, it's so important what you're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Ed.